Let me first give that disclaimer line, very important to say what I'm going to say in this context. The first thing I'd like to say is I love the church. I have several friends, priests and religious, who also have shared various things that have happened with them across the years. I think somebody did a lot of work on that introduction. I sent just 2 lines. Okay, but anyways, so I've been engaged with a number of students, both in the Bombay Seminary, St. Pius X, as also since 2012 with JD Deacons. Much of what I'm going to say goes into 4 areas that priests and religious are expected to do, and then I'm going to look at what they're not expected to do. So let's start off with the first one. No? So many people say priests and religious have to be people of prayer, take us to the sacraments. And then we had, I think Sister Veroni already pointed out something like this. Post-COVID, I think the church has also been affected by this. We have a pre-COVID time and a post-COVID time. In the post-COVID time, we have had cases where sometimes not just visiting homes does not happen, but even final funeral services are refused, so much so that people have to go from parish to parish asking for a priest to come across. This, I think, continued even beyond the second wave, when there was nothing else happening. Everyone was traveling, but there were some priests or religious who said, I can't do this, ask another priest. So there's this big worry about what do we understand when lay people understand that a priest, particularly, is meant to take us to God. There are many answers. Again, understand this, that's why I gave that disclaimer at the start. It's not about an individual priest. Somewhere it's coming through as a general attitude that comes down. That this is something that, I have my fixed times, I have my fixed days. If you have something, come during those fixed days and fixed times. And this is worrying. Gone are the days of saying, a sick call meant a priest went, just like a fireman or a firewoman. Today, it's about saying, look, you want to fall sick, you fall sick only within this time, or I'll come tomorrow. A very senior priest, 76 years old in my archdiocese, when I told him I'm coming here, he said, please talk about the fact that today hospital visits have stopped. Talk about the fact that today there is no more about, reaching out to the senior citizens. And he's a senior priest who's worried about where we are heading in terms of formation. There are many priests I have encountered on holiday who actually say that canon law doesn't specify that a priest must celebrate Mass every day. Now, to my mind, and I think you mentioned that earlier, that is probably the biggest thing or the biggest gift that a priest has, to celebrate the Eucharist. But imagine an attitude that comes that says, I'm on holiday, I don't need to celebrate Mass. As long as I fulfill the breviary, etc., I do the basic things that are required, canon law doesn't force me to celebrate Mass. When he says this, privately it's okay. To a group of people who will understand, it's okay. But when he says this in front of, let us say, a bunch of school teachers, when they are traveling together and they're all looking forward to the priest celebrating the Eucharist on a Sunday at least, he says, I'm on holiday. I'm worrying, very worrying. To my mind, then we've not really understood the purpose of being in the priesthood. So when you're looking at the whole concept of why do our church employees sometimes are the furthest from church, it's a little worrying because sometimes they see priests and religious close by. So some years ago, in 2012, I headed up a team that was looking at human resources across the Diocese of Bombay. And at least 6 of my team decided that they don't want to continue because they said it was affecting their faith. And we had to do a lot of counseling. We sent them to some of our senior priests because they were looking at some of those things that I took for granted. But they were saying this sort of affects the faith in terms of what happens with the second point. So if you see that second point, a sense of fairness and justice. This seems to be missing very often in our dealings with people. we're not here talking about interpersonal skills. There are many people, many priests, religious, who are good with interpersonal skills, but at a time when it comes to being fair, to being just, sometimes many people border on this part of favoritism. I have my own favorites, people whom I promote in some way. And here again, I bring in the point of, it's not just about one or two cases. It becomes a sort of, to use a bad word, endemic to the system. In terms of administrative skills, I think we've been hearing, we try to cover this up a lot. I am part of the cover up too at the Examiner so often, because people write from across the country. People send in details. There are often, sometimes I wonder whether this is given by someone who's within the system. So either a priest or a nun who's within the system who has shared that information, because it won't be known to the average layperson. The worry is about our the priests or religious in an administrative position. Particularly, how do you handle property? How do you handle money? By the way, this is not something only for the Catholic Church. Since the last 8 years, I've also been interacting through the YMCA with a lot of our Christian churches, and we seem to have this problem across Christian churches. Somebody who decides that this property I can get rid of on my own, or this is what will happen, and it hurts the average Catholic who suddenly starts to see this as, it's not necessarily that it's for the priest or religious. Sometimes, so there's this nice word, theologians will define that thin line between what is morally acceptable and legally acceptable, or that question about commission versus omission. Sometimes it's not the priest or religious taking that money. It's about allowing someone else to do that. So I had a little stint as a development consultant with Caritas, with 3 dioceses in the western region of India. And sometimes I would just shake my head, Things would vanish. You've given money for funds for something that is bought, and you go back again after a year and it has vanished. So did you file a police complaint? No. You know who took it? Yes. Why aren't you scolding the person? That person keeps on taking things. See, I can understand, somebody takes a pen home, a set of, let us say, stationery home, but you take a whole LCD projector vanishes. But the worst I've ever seen was a whole Jeep vanishing. How can you put a Jeep into a pocket or a bag? And you don't even file a police complaint? And something is wrong with our administrative skills. Somewhere we are allowing people to take advantage. Again, not in the 3 dioceses, but somewhere else in our country, there was somebody who actually took home the trust deed of the organization, the trust deed of the Diocesan Social Service Society. These are worrying things. When we talk about trusteeship, particularly in the Latin Rite, this is a very worrying thing, because the sole trustee is the parish priest, is the one in charge of that institution. These are things that we possibly need to correct. We're trying in some ways to say this. So Jesuits, particularly the Jesuit juniors now, are being trained at the Interregional Juniorate in Mumbai in stewardship. We're talking about taking responsibility. We're talking about saying, don't say that this is something that will happen later. Start already as a junior. Let them already start to understand that they are responsible for the impression and the reaction that lay people have related to priests and religious. Let me therefore take you to this worrying question about radiating Christ. There's a story told by Archbishop Fulton Sheen that in a part of Russia, soon after the end of communism, he asked a child, "Do you believe in Jesus?" And probably 11-year-old told him, "No, I don't believe in Jesus, because you see, back home, I have a lot of family problems. My father regularly beats up my mother. I go to bed hungry. I don't believe there is another Christ. I don't believe in Christ because I don't see Christ." Sometimes in the work that happens to priests and religious in various ways, understand that a lot of it is good work. But sometimes when we look at our problem with vocations, and I've been part of those think tanks in the Bombay Diocese for the last 9 years now, Some of our hostelites, some of those who have interacted closely with priests and religious, don't come to the church anymore. Somewhere this has to worry us. No? It worries me also. I'm a married person and I'm worried about the general attitude to some of our younger ones who don't want to get married. That is again a problem with our example probably. So they see certain things. If I talk to some of my students at the university, Catholic ones particularly, they are just happy with being single and not getting into a committed relationship. So we need to possibly understand where that comes from. I want to go to that part about being an animator, a catalyst. Prophetic is about standing up and speaking even when it is not popular, especially when it is not popular. I think some of you will have seen that yesterday. A number of presenters have talked about it. But I think it's going to be important to say this within the church, not from outside. I don't believe in throwing stones from outside. We don't go to the secular press and say, okay, let me throw a stone against somebody there. Within the Catholic Church, even this entire conference needs to start to identify what needs to change from within. On one side, we are looking at dwindling vocations. The last Catholic yearbook tells us the numbers are not good. The numbers have dropped. We are thinking about it. We may pray more. But I think we also need to change systems within. So that is something that possibly this conference will throw up. I liked what the previous panel did in terms of the rector's challenges, Father Richard, and Sister Meti as well in terms of formator's challenges. So how do we connect with all ages? I would throw up a few examples of what not to do first, because one of the worries is that a priest is meant to connect, a sister is meant to connect with all. And somewhere that's not happening. We have chosen, if I'm saying that, a younger priest will talk only to youth, middle-aged one will talk only to, let us say, certain groups. And by the time we realize that we have to talk to all, it's past our prime. So I think it's important to connect to all ages, whatever situation you are in. I keep telling those of our regents who go out from the Bombay Seminary, don't wait for that special day. Talk to as many as possible. When you come back after weekend ministry, you should have at least spoken to 5 new people every Sunday. But it doesn't always happen. It's a difficulty that is inherent. So let me therefore bring us to the next part. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah. So some of those things that are bad in terms of example, bad in terms of what we do. There was a priest who was happily running a Bible class on social media during the time of COVID, but then it continued for some time till we happily had somebody rap him on the knuckles. He said, I'm cooking with the Bible. So you take a Bible verse and then run a whole series, and this is one worry. To justify something that is not primarily your key domain as a priest or religious. Is that what you are meant to do? I think already yesterday onwards someone has said this. Let's move out of those institutional roles, appoint somebody competent. That's another problem. Sometimes we appoint people just because either they are related or because we are over-compassionate. This is again another worry. So lay people are looking at a priest or religious as appointing people based on competence, not based on compassion. Just for the sake of appointing, I feel sorry for this person, keep them occupied. That should not be our primary concern. We need to be able to figure out how to coordinate rather than doing everything yourself. This, I think, is a big worry. Very often we have priests, religious sisters who don't delegate because they don't trust others. They're not necessarily only lay people, but they don't trust others within the congregation. We need to also look at the fact of, and I'll go quickly here, spending money on acquiring treasure and pleasure. I think this is a worrying thing I'm noticing personally in the last 6 to 7 years, particularly among diocesan priests, but recently we heard of 2 of our religious as well, who are playing in the stock market with congregation money, who are using the money that is in trust, doing certain things. So there's this priest who now owns 3 homes, none of which he uses, but he boasts about it. He's talking about this to younger ones, and I think the faster the bishops, keep him quiet, it's better for the whole church. But these are worrying things, because these are things which are coming up more and more. There was a sister in the Diocese of Purnia who mentioned and said, today young people are joining because they see that the priest or religious sister has access to a lot of facilities which they don't have. So they're joining because of that. I don't know how much that is necessarily true, but it seems to be on the way. I don't think we can close this one without talking about what not to do. Exclusive relationships, when a priest in counseling, a young priest 3 years into ministry, decides that he will be the stand-in husband because the woman has a marital problem. I think those are bad examples. A woman who goes to the priest for counseling, has the priest accompanying her for shopping expeditions, has the priest going on a holiday with her family. These are not signs that, and people are talking about it. It reaches all the way up. The problem is only transferred. These transfers don't help. No? Somewhere we need serious counseling. So we have a number of cases today of, forget about the young ones, of priests particularly, I know, who need to be counseled in terms of using social media, who need to be counseled in terms of access to porn. It's a worry also, these exclusive relationships, especially when they excuse themselves and say, I'm going to have a 1-hour conversation with somebody at 11:30 in the night. And these are not things that, go well. I don't know where to start. Maybe we all need to pray more, but we need to talk about this more. I want to close with this very worrying one that says, who will change? Who will change? On one side, you have the expectations of the laity. On the other side, you have systems that may not necessarily be amenable to change. There's that famous story about everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. You know those 4 people. I'm not going into the story. I've heard the second bell. I think it's time for us here, but even individually, wherever we are, in whatever roles we play, whether as superiors or administrators, formators in some form, wherever you are, can we at least start off looking at better ways of giving a good example to others around us? Thank you.